This refrigerator took me way too long to figure out what was wrong with it. It actually came to me from the other side of the state. When I got it, I noticed there was a Molex plug that was disconnected. Came back a few hours later, and it was still not cooling. Compressor felt like it was running just fine, so we're going to throw on a piercing valve and see what the pressure is. Seeing as there is no pressure in here, we're going to add a little bit of refrigerant, then a little bit of nitrogen. Now we just need to find the leak. After about 5 minutes of looking, I was able to find the leak between the compressor and the condenser. Not the easiest part to get to, had to remove the fan and the drip tray. Get the affected piece cut out, and instead of trying to bend a new piece, I'm just going to straight pipe it. Get the new piece cut, deburred, and pull this wad through to remove as much of the debris as possible. Piece put in place, prep the site, and protect the rest of the refrigerator from the flame. After we get everything brazed in, we're going to need to run a vacuum on this. Since I did have to cut the system open, I will be removing the piercing valve and braze on a proper access port. Before I braze on that port, I will remove the core so that that doesn't melt, cut into the tube, get it deburred, and the pieces won't fit together, so we're going to have to swedge one of the ends in order to get the other one to slip into it. Next, we need to protect everything else from the heat of brazing, wrap some wet rags around the compressor, light the torch, and get the access port brazed in. Once everything cools down, we're going to hook it up to the vacuum and see if it has any leaks. Ran the vacuum for about 20 minutes, then came back the next day and it was still holding a vacuum. After that, we're going to add a charge of refrigerant, and the factory charge is right at 5 ounces. Means that I don't want to have to put everything together. I'm just going to use this box fan to keep the refrigerator cool for testing. At this point, the refrigerator is not cooling and the compressor is pulling into a vacuum at about negative 20 inches of mercury. Got the charge recovered, and I did not replace the filter dryer last time. Because of that, I figured there's a restriction either on the filter dryer or on the capillary tube. While I've got the system open, I'm going to remove that piece of straight pipe and put the proper bend in this pipe and get that thing installed. And at this point is where I made my mistake. Between the filter dryer and the condenser, there was a blockage of some type. I don't find this out till later, and I'm going to have to cut into the system for a third time. But for now, get the filter dryer cut out, prep a few of the fittings for the filter dryer, and once again protect the compressor with a wet rag. Once we've got everything in place, we just take our MAP gas torch, throw a little bit of silver solder on both sides of the filter dryer. Once everything cools off, we hook the vacuum pump up again, pull it into a deep vacuum, and let it sit overnight. Come back the next day. Since it's still in a vacuum, we're just going to run the vacuum pump for about another 20 minutes. And while we wait, curiosity has got the better of me, and I'm going to cut into the filter dryer to see what the inside of that thing looks like. After we get it open, it doesn't look too bad at the start, but towards the end we had quite a bit of this black residue. Here you can see the bottom side of the filter dryer where it's by the capillary tube, and there's a bunch of buildup on the bottom. Break out the tank of R134A and add a 5-ounce charge. Get the system charged up, and same exact thing, negative 20 inches of mercury. Recover the refrigerant, cut out the filter dryer, and cut between the compressor and the condenser. We then blow nitrogen from the filter dryer back towards the condenser, and we get that powder out. Blow from the evaporator back to the filter dryer, and once again we get this mysterious powder. Once we got that blockage removed, we're going to add in a brand new filter dryer. We get the capillary tube brazed on. Next, we're going to need to protect the refrigerator as we sweat the liquid line on. We're going to use this Play-Doh looking substance called wet rag and use this flame cloth that we have also soaked in water. Filter dryer don't want to stay in place, so we just got to hold it in place, get it sweated on, and call it good. Once everything cools off, we can take off this Play-Doh type substance, add a little bit of moisture, and add it back to our can for next time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I have to figure out what this powder is. It burns orange in a flame like steel would, and it also reacts to a magnet, so I'm taking for granted it's iron oxide. Once everything cools off, we're going to hook everything back up to a vacuum and see how deep of a vacuum we can pull. Got it down to 1,000. We're going to do a decay test to see if we still have moisture in the system. Once it passes, we are going to add a refrigerant charge. Once again, from the system being in a vacuum to just opening up the tank, it will take almost 4 ounces of refrigerant. The last 1.2 ounces of refrigerant will be pulled in by the compressor once we start the system. And finally, after working on the system for way too long, we finally have cooling. Let it run overnight, come back in the morning, the freezer's at about a -5, and the refrigerator is about 35 degrees. We don't have an access port on the liquid side, so we can only monitor the temperature there. And after letting the refrigerator run for 24 hours, we're going to be satisfied with everything. So we're going to add a valve stem back to the access port and get all of our equipment removed from it. Also very important to put a cap on the access port so we don't have any leaks. Now the fun part of reassembling everything. Get the drip tray reinstalled, get this bolt added back to the compressor, reinstall the condenser fan and motor, get the sheet metal bent back into place by using these pliers. Then we need to hook the drip tube back up. Once we got that done, we hook up all of the electrical connections, get everything routed properly, and get the back plate reinstalled. 8 screws around the perimeter, get the back plate reinstalled with the water valve, and finally, after way too much time, we have a functioning refrigerator, which we're probably just going to keep in the shop because I don't trust it anywhere else. But I'm done with this and on to the next project.